All right, today we're setting sail on a journey that connects the 11th century with the 21st. We're going to explore how an ancient navigational mystery is literally providing the blueprint for our autonomous future.
Okay, so let's dive right in. We usually think of ancient tech as, kind of primitive. But what if a simple wooden disc and a legendary crystal actually hold the key to fixing one of modern technology's biggest weaknesses? We're going to draw a straight line from Viking longships to the GPS-denied drones of tomorrow.
So, first things first, let's really wrap our heads around the massive problem the Vikings had to solve. How on earth did they become the absolute masters of one of the most treacherous oceans on the planet?
Look, it's not just that they crossed the Atlantic, which is incredible on its own. It's how they did it that's so mind-blowing. They practiced something called latitude sailing, basically sticking to a perfectly straight line, like the 61st parallel, for thousands of kilometers across a stormy ocean. Doing that without a magnetic compass? That is an absolutely staggering feat. It hints at a level of precision that, honestly, for centuries historians just couldn't figure out.
Well, the first big clue, the thing that started to unravel this whole mystery, was dug up from the ruins of a convent in Greenland. This small, kind of unassuming piece of wood, known as the Uunartoq Disc, completely flipped the script on everything we thought we knew about their capabilities.
Now, when they first found it, they thought, okay, it's some kind of sundial. Makes sense. But the more they looked at it, the less that simple explanation held water. And that's when things got really interesting.
The initial idea was pretty straightforward, right? You stick a pin, a gnomon, in the center. As the sun moves across the sky, you just track the tip of the shadow, and when that shadow hits a specific line you've drawn on the disc, bam! You've found true north. Simple, effective, and it works. Well, sometimes. And here is the big, fatal flaw in that theory. Up in the North Atlantic, the sun is super low in the sky for long stretches of the day. So what does that do? It creates these incredibly long shadows. And on a tiny little disc, only 70 millimeters across, that shadow would just shoot right off the edge. It would make the tool completely useless. That tells you right there, they weren't using it that way.
This is what pushed researchers towards a much cooler, much smarter idea, the Twilight Board. Get this, instead of tracking the tiny tip of a shadow from a skinny pin, what if the Vikings were tracking the straight edge of a shadow from something much wider? Maybe like a shadow stick they held in that big hole in the middle. This method is actually perfectly designed for long shadows and a low sun. It's custom built for the Arctic environment.
But wait a minute. Even the most advanced sun compass in the world is totally useless if you can't see the sun. And that brings us to the next amazing piece of this puzzle, a tool that sounds like it came straight out of a fantasy novel.
If you've ever been near the North Atlantic, you know the weather is just brutal. Thick fog, constant clouds, that's the default setting. So for a culture that supposedly depended on the sun to navigate, that should have been a complete deal-breaker.
So the big question is, how in the world could they find the sun when it was totally hidden? Well, the answer might be in the old Viking sagas themselves, something they called the solarstein, or the sunstone. For ages, everyone just dismissed this as a myth, but it turns out it's based on some seriously cool physics.
Okay, let's get into the science for a second, because it's wild. Even when the sun is completely covered by clouds, its light still filters through and scatters in a very specific, predictable pattern. It's like there's an invisible map of light stretched across the entire sky. Our eyes can't see it, but certain crystals can. And this is how it works. A sunstone is probably a special kind of crystal, like Icelandic Spar, that's birefringent, which is just a fancy way of saying it splits a single beam of light into two. This crystal acts like a decoder for that invisible map. You look through it and rotate it. When the two images you see through it are equally bright, you found the direction of that invisible grid. And that grid points you, like an arrow, straight back to where the sun is hiding, with crazy accuracy. So, an ancient wooden disc and a special crystal let the Vikings navigate without seeing the sun and without a magnetic compass. Why does this matter to us today? Because, believe it or not, we're facing the exact same problem, just in a totally different context. Think about it. Our entire world runs on GPS, but those signals coming from satellites are actually really fragile. They can get blocked by buildings, they can be jammed by an enemy, they can even be faked to send a vehicle way off course. For autonomous ships and drones, this is a massive, massive weak spot.
But here's the cool part. Nature figured this out millions of years ago.
Insects like desert ants have these specialized cells in their eyes that can read that same invisible map of polarized light in the sky. It lets them navigate with incredible precision, even in a featureless desert. It is a time-tested, rock-solid solution.
And this is where it all comes full circle. On one hand, you have the Viking sunstone, a natural crystal. On the other, its modern-day equivalent, a high-tech camera sensor. You can think of it like a silicon chip that has millions of microscopic polarized sunglasses etched right onto it. This lets a camera see that light pattern just like the sunstone did, but it does it in real time.
And the applications for this tech are just blowing up. Engineers are building these bionic compasses into autonomous ships and underwater vehicles, giving them a reliable heading when GPS fails. Drones flying in cities where signals get blocked, this is their backup plan. This ancient principle is becoming an absolutely critical safety net for 21st century tech.
So, it's pretty clear, right? This is not just some dusty old history lesson. The way the Vikings thought about navigation is directly informing the logic of our future machines.
This quote just nails it. The exact same fundamental physics, the scattering of light, the geometry of shadows, polarization, all the stuff a Viking navigator understood in their gut 1,000 years ago is now being written into the code that will guide our autonomous explorers.
You see, the Uunartoq Disc, the Sunstone, the Shadow Stick, they weren't just separate tools. They were an integrated system, a multi-sensor suite that combined data from the sun, from shadows, and from polarized light to create one robust navigational picture. It was a solution that was far more advanced and resilient than we ever gave them credit for.
And that leaves us with one last big thought. The Vikings solved a complex problem with elegant physics-based tools. It just makes you wonder, what other secrets are out there, hiding in ancient artifacts, holding the blueprints for the challenges that we face tomorrow?